The first time I realized my marriage was over, it wasn't because I saw a lipstick stain. It was because my wife introduced me like I was a coat she'd forgotten at the restaurant. Evan, she said into the cluster of laughing donors and champagne flutes, keeps my life running. You know, the practical stuff. Practical, like a wrench, like a spare tire, like something you store in the trunk until the real car shows up. The room chuckled politely. Of course they did. In rooms like this, people laughed the way they breathed, automatically, to prove they belonged. The ballroom at the Glasshouse Hotel glowed with that expensive kind of light that makes everyone's skin look smoother and everyone's lies look more reasonable. There were crystal chandeliers above us, white linen below, and a string quartet playing something soft enough to feel classy and harmless. My wife looked flawless. She always did when there was an audience. Lila had learned years ago that beauty isn't just about features, it's about certainty. She moved like she owned the air around her, like the world had already agreed to forgive whatever she did as long as she smiled while doing it. Her hand rested on the forearm of Dylan Voss. Not gripping, not desperate, just familiar, like it belonged there. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Dylan was the kind of man who wore a suit the way a priest wore robes, not because he needed it, but because it made other people behave. He had that calm, controlled face, the one that said he'd never had to raise his voice to get what he wanted. He didn't look at me like a rival. He looked at me like a detail. Evan, right? Dylan said, like he was checking a label. Lila tells me you're the steady one. The steady one. That was new. I was collecting titles tonight. Practical, steady. Any minute now, someone would pat my head and tell me I was a good boy for not chewing the furniture. I smiled anyway. I've always been good at smiling. When you grow up being underestimated, you either learn to bark or you learn to let people think you're asleep while you count exits. The steady one, I agreed. It's a glamorous brand. Lila's laugh was perfect. Light, effortless. The kind of laugh that made people want to be invited to whatever she was laughing at. Her eyes didn't touch mine for long. They skimmed me the way you skim a menu after you've already decided what you're ordering. She leaned in toward Dylan, close enough that her perfume shifted. Lila wore different perfumes depending on who she wanted to be. Tonight was the charity wife scent. Expensive, clean, a hint of something floral that made donors feel generous and men feel lucky. But underneath it, just barely, was something sharper. Something newer. Like she'd layered a second version of herself over the first and hoped nobody could smell the seam. The MC clinked a glass at the front of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could have your attention, welcome to the annual fundraising gala for the Bright Horizons Foundation. Applause rolled through the room like a wave practicing good manners. I watched my wife's posture change as she turned toward the stage. It was subtle. Her shoulders squared. Her chin lifted. She wasn't just attending this event. She was performing it. And Dylan watched her with that satisfied little half-smile that men get when they believe they're responsible for a woman's glow. Maybe I would have missed it if I'd been the kind of husband who walked through life asleep. But I wasn't. I'd been awake a long time. I'd just been pretending I wasn't because pretending keeps you married. Lila had been busy for months. Meetings, committees, planning sessions, networking lunches, a new wellness routine that required late-night walks and early morning breath work. That somehow always happened with her phone face down on the counter. At first, I tried to be supportive. I bought her the fancy planner she wanted. I made jokes about her becoming the mayor of Charityville. I told myself it was normal for ambitious people to expand. Then the little things started adding up. The way she stopped leaving her phone unattended, even in our own kitchen. The way she'd smile at texts and then lock her face before she looked up at me. The way she started showering the second she came home, like she wanted to rinse off the day. Or the proof of it. The way she started saying my name less. And I don't mean she said it in a different tone. I mean she stopped saying it at all. Like using my name would make me real again, and she didn't want that. I told myself I was imagining things. Because that's what people do when reality threatens to break their life in half. They don't deny the truth. Not exactly. They negotiate with it. Tonight, standing in the Glasshouse Hotel under crystal chandeliers, I felt my negotiations end. The first big moment came during cocktail hour. Lila was talking to a woman from the foundation board, a silver-haired donor type who wore pearls like a warning. Dylan stood beside them, relaxed, like he belonged in the picture. I stood a few steps back, the way husbands were supposed to. The donor laughed and said, "Lila, you are a miracle. I don't know how you balance it all. A marriage, a home, a career, and all of this. Lila's eyes flicked toward me, not warmly, not lovingly, more like she was checking whether I'd behave. "Oh, it's easy," she said. "Evan doesn't need much. He's very low maintenance." Low maintenance. I felt something cold flicker behind my ribs. I'd always assumed low maintenance was a compliment, the way people called you easygoing when they meant convenient. The donor smiled in that brittle way rich people smile when they're judging you politely. "How lucky you are, Evan. Some men can't handle a woman with this much drive." I raised my glass. I try not to get in the way of greatness. Lila's lips tightened for half a second, the smallest crack in her mask, and then the smile came back. Perfect again. Dylan's eyes met mine, just for a moment, and there it was. Not guilt, not fear, amusement, like we were playing a game and he already knew the rules. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down. "Lila, where are you?" I looked up. She was 5 feet away, still talking, still laughing, but she'd texted me instead of turning her head. That wasn't normal. That was something you did when you didn't want people to see you acknowledge someone. I typed back with my thumb. "Here, behind you." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, "Oh, stay there. Stay there." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I wasn't a husband in that room. I was a prop. A useful, quiet prop that made her look respectable. My chest tightened, and my first impulse was to do what I'd always done. Swallow it. Smile. Let it pass. Go home, eat dinner, pretend we were fine. But then Lila touched Dylan's arm again. Not accidentally, not for balance. Just a casual little ownership, like she was reminding him, or herself, that she could. I set my drink down before I crushed the glass. The rest of the night ran on rails. Lila floated. Dylan hovered. I followed like a shadow with a wedding ring. When the dinner started, Lila was seated at the main table. Of course she was. She belonged up there, under the lights, near the microphones and the cameras. Dylan had a seat 2 chairs away. I was placed just far enough to be included in photos if someone angled the shot wide, but not close enough to be in the conversation. I tried to find humor in it. That's my default setting. If I can laugh, I can breathe. I watched Lila lean in to whisper something to Dylan. His head dipped close, too close, and her mouth curved in a smile that didn't belong to me. I stared at the back of his neck and imagined slapping him. Not hard, not violent, just enough to knock that smugness out of his shoulders for a second. Then I imagined what would happen if I did. Security would appear, fast and polite. People would gasp. Lila would look at me like I'd embarrassed her. Dylan would play the victim. And tomorrow, in 100 soft conversations, I would become the unstable husband. I could already hear it. Evan had an episode. Evan couldn't handle her success. Evan is insecure. So I did what I always did. I stayed steady. I waited. When the speeches started, Lila stood and walked to the stage in heels that clicked like punctuation. The room quieted instantly, like her confidence had trained them. She took the microphone and smiled out at everyone. "Thank you," she said, voice warm, rehearsed, beautiful. "It means everything to see so many people who believe in the same future." I watched her speak like she was painting a picture where she was the heroine, where the Bright Horizons Foundation was her calling, where her marriage was a supportive background detail. She mentioned me once. Once. "Of course," she said. "I couldn't do any of this without my support system at home." Support system. Not husband, not partner. Support system. Like a vitamin. Applause swelled again. People looked at me and smiled, like I was a well-trained dog. I clapped too. Slow. Calm. Lila's eyes found mine for half a second on stage. There was a flash of something in them. Not love, not even gratitude. Control, like she was checking the leash. When the event ended, Lila didn't come to me. She didn't loop her arm through mine. She didn't say, "Let's go." She drifted into a cluster of donors and board members with Dylan at her side, already moving into the next conversation. Her phone was in her hand, her posture alert, like she was waiting for a signal. I stood there for a while, watching, and I realized I wasn't sad. I was embarrassed. Not because she might be cheating, because she didn't even bother hiding her contempt. I left without saying goodbye, not dramatically. I just slipped out. The way you slip out of a party when you realize you were never actually invited, you were just useful for the photo. Outside, the night air hit my face like a cold palm. The city smelled like wet pavement and expensive cigarettes. My car was parked 2 blocks away because I'd refused valet on principle. The same principle that had apparently earned me the title, low maintenance. I drove home with the radio off. The apartment was too quiet when I walked in. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own thoughts scrape. I kicked off my shoes and went straight to the kitchen. Not because I was hungry, because I needed something normal, something simple. There was a glass in the sink, Lila's, lipstick print on the rim. Not bright red, a softer shade, something she wore when she wanted to look innocent. I stared at it. Then I noticed the smell in the air. Not her perfume, something else, something sharper, more masculine, like cologne that tried too hard. It was faint, like it had been here and then left, but my brain latched onto it the way it latched onto danger. I walked through the apartment slowly, like a man checking a house after hearing a bump in the night. The bedroom was neat, Lila's side untouched, the closet door slightly open. On the dresser, her jewelry tray sat in perfect order, earrings lined up like obedient soldiers. Except for one thing. Her wedding ring wasn't there. My stomach tightened. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe. I told myself maybe she took it off to wash her hands, maybe it was in her purse, maybe she didn't want it scratched during the gala. Then my eyes fell on her purse hanging on the chair. The flap was half open. That wasn't like her. Lila treated her purse like it contained nuclear codes. I stood, walked over, and looked inside. I didn't dig. I didn't rummage. I just looked. There was a slim black folder in there, a Gala packet, the kind they hand out to committee members. On the front, embossed in silver, were the words, Glasshouse Security Consultation. Private. My fingers went numb. Security consultation. Dylan Voss worked in security. That's what he'd told me. I pulled the folder out, opened it, and found a single card inside. A reservation card for the Glasshouse Hotel bar. Tonight. 11:30 p.m. 2 names printed neatly at the bottom, Lila Klein D. Voss. I stared until the letters stopped looking like letters and started looking like a joke. My phone buzzed again. Oh, Lila. Heading home soon. Don't wait up. Busy night? Busy night? I laughed once, out loud, the sound sharp and ugly in the quiet apartment. I set the card down on the dresser, right next to the empty space where her ring should have been, and sat back on the bed. I didn't cry. I didn't punch a wall. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there and listened to the building's pipes tick and cool. And then, at 11 p.m. exactly, someone knocked on my door. Not a timid knock, not a polite one. 3 firm hits, like whoever it was already knew I was awake. I stood and walked to the door, my heart steady in a way that didn't feel human. When I opened it, Nadia Voss was standing in my hallway. Lila's sister. Gorgeous in that dangerous way, like she didn't need to try, and that made it worse. Dark hair pulled back, eyes sharp, lipstick untouched. She didn't look like a woman who'd been crying into a pillow. She looked like a woman who'd made a decision. She held her phone up, screen glowing. Your wife on a date with my husband right now? You going to them, or going on a date with me instead? I stared at her. The sane answer would have been, what? The sane answer would have been, are you sure? The sane answer would have been, I'm calling my wife. But something inside me, something that had been swallowing words for months, finally sat up and smiled. I leaned against the doorframe and let my face do what it had forgotten how to do. I smile. Forget them. Come in. Nadia stepped past me without hesitation, and as she crossed my threshold, I noticed the one detail that made the hair rise on my arms. Her left hand was bare. No wedding ring. She wasn't here to warn me. She was here to start something. Nadia didn't sit like a guest. She moved through my apartment like she already knew where the sharp edges were. I watched her cross to the kitchen, glance at the counter, the sink, the half-open purse on the chair. Her eyes flicked to the reservation card on my dresser like she'd expected it to be there. Like she'd already run this scene in her head and was checking whether reality matched the script. Don't look at me like that, she said, pulling out a chair and sitting with her back straight. I'm not here to cry. I wasn't going to offer you tissues, I said. I was going to offer you a helmet. Nadia's mouth twitched. Not a smile, more like she was acknowledging the joke because refusing it would give me too much satisfaction. She put her phone on the table, screen down. Her hands were steady. No shaking, no dramatic wiping at mascara. If anything, she looked controlled. The kind of controlled that makes you nervous because it's not a mood, it's a choice. How long have you known? She asked. I didn't, I said. I suspected. There's a difference. Nadia leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. You suspected your wife was sleeping with my husband and you just lived with it? I let out a short laugh. I suspected my wife was lying. I suspected she was with someone. I didn't suspect she'd pick her sister's husband. That's bold. Bold, Nadia repeated, tasting the word like it was bitter. That's one way to say it. I walked to the sink, poured myself water, then poured her water too, because I was raised by people who did stupid, polite things even when the house was on fire. I slid the glass toward her. She didn't touch it. Where are they? I asked. Nadia's eyes stayed on me. Glasshouse. Private lounge. The one behind the bar where they pretend it's not a private lounge. Of course. A hidden room for hidden people who needed the illusion of being seen only when it benefited them. And you know this how? I asked. Nadia's gaze dropped, just for a second, toward her bare left hand, then back up. I tracked my husband, she said, blunt. Not with spyware, not with a GPS. Don't start imagining I'm a lunatic. I raised a hand. I wasn't. Yet. She exhaled slowly. Dylan is careless with routine. He tells the same lies with different words. Security consult. Late meeting. Client emergency. And he always stops for one drink before he comes home, like he's washing the night off his breath. She finally picked up the glass and took a small sip. Tonight he forgot to turn off his car's Bluetooth. It connected to my phone when he started it. I frowned. You're still paired? He never unpaired, Nadia said, because he's the kind of man who assumes the world cleans up after him. That line hit harder than it should have, because it was the same kind of man my wife had been standing beside all evening. Nadia leaned forward, elbows on the table. I heard the navigation prompt. Continue to the Glasshouse Hotel? And I heard him laugh, like he was on speaker with someone, a woman. Lila, I said. Nadia nodded once. Like it hurt, but she refused to let it show. I drove there. I saw her car. I saw him walk in. And then I came here. I stared at her for a moment. My brain tried to assemble the story into a shape that made sense. 2 families, 2 marriages, 1 hotel, 1 sister, 1 husband who had apparently built his entire life on the assumption that consequences were a myth invented for poor people. Why not go in and drag him out by the ear? I asked. Because, Nadia said, voice level, I'm not giving them a scene they can rewrite later. I felt my throat tighten. Rewrite? She nodded. They'll say you were jealous. They'll say I'm unstable. They'll say we're dramatic. They'll turn it into a story where they're the reasonable adults and we're the messy ones who couldn't handle their friendship. Friendship. That was the word cheaters used when they wanted the lie to sound tasteful. I sat across from her. So what do you want? Nadia held my gaze. Truth. First, I want to see them together, close enough that there's no plausible deniability. Then I want leverage. Leverage, I repeated. Not blackmail, she said immediately, like she could hear the accusation forming. I'm not asking you to threaten anyone. I'm asking you to stop letting them play the only game in town. I felt something shift in my chest. A slow, cold settling. Not rage. Rage is hot and stupid. This felt like math. And what do you think I want? I asked. Nadia's eyes flicked over my face like she was reading a document. You want to stop feeling like a prop. I opened my mouth, then closed it, because she wasn't wrong, and hearing it said out loud made it feel less like a private shame and more like a fact I could do something about. Outside, somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's door opened and closed, a muffled laugh. A normal life passing by my own, like a train I'd missed. Nadia stood. We don't have all night. They'll leave through the side entrance around midnight. Dylan likes the service corridor. It makes him feel important. I blinked. You know his exit habits? Nadia's smile was thin. I've been married to him. You think I don't know what kind of man he is when nobody's watching? I stood too, grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door. Then I paused. Ground rules, I said. Nadia tilted her head. Okay. No fighting, I said. No screaming, no running into the lounge like we're on reality TV. Agreed. No illegal stuff, I added. No breaking into rooms, no stealing footage. No, whatever people do when they're desperate and stupid. Nadia's eyes sharpened. I'm not desperate. I shrugged. Good, because I'm trying very hard not to be stupid. She nodded once. Then we do it clean. Clean. That word sounded almost funny in a story like this, but I liked it anyway. Clean meant control. Clean meant they couldn't paint me as the villain before I'd earned it. We walked out together. The elevator ride down felt too quiet, like the building itself was listening. In my car, Nadia didn't ask to play music. She didn't scroll her phone. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring out the window like she was memorizing the city she might be leaving. I drove with the radio off. On the way, she spoke once, softly, like she was talking to herself. "She always did this," Nadia said. I glanced at her. "Did what?" "Take," she said. "Not money, not objects. She takes attention, takes rooms, takes people, even when she already has them." I tightened my grip on the wheel. My wife had always been the sun in any room. I'd thought it was charisma. I'd thought it was ambition. I'd told myself I loved it because it made life bright. Now I wondered if I'd just been warming myself next to a fire that was quietly consuming everything around it. The Glasshouse Hotel rose ahead of us like a polished lie. White lights, tall glass, the kind of place where your reflection looked more successful than you felt. I parked 2 streets away. Nadia did the same, deliberately, like she didn't want anyone to see our cars side by side. We met at the corner and walked separately toward the entrance, timing our steps. When we got inside, the lobby smelled like money and fresh flowers. A concierge looked up and smiled automatically. Then his smile flickered when his eyes landed on Nadia. Not recognition, something else. Like he knew her type. Like he knew she belonged here. Nadia kept her face neutral and walked past without slowing. I followed at a distance, head down, shoulders relaxed. The trick in places like this isn't to hide. It's to look like you have every right to be there. We drifted toward the bar. The main lounge was still open, quieter now, late-night calm settling in. A few couples murmured over cocktails. A businessman laughed too loud at something his date didn't find funny. The bartender wiped down the counter like he was erasing the night. Nadia turned slightly, pretending to look at a framed photo on the wall, and murmured, "Back." I followed her gaze. Behind the bar, there was a corridor with a door marked "Staff Only." A security camera angled down from the ceiling like a bored eye. And just beyond that door, a shadow moved. I felt my pulse jump. Not because I was scared of getting caught, but because I knew what waited back there. The truth. The thing my brain had been avoiding, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Nadia didn't look at me. She walked toward the restroom hallway, slow and casual. I moved toward a small seating area near a decorative plant that was probably worth more than my car. We waited. Minutes stretched. The lounge music hummed. The bartender laughed softly at something a guest said. Then the staff door opened. Dylan stepped out first. He didn't look guilty. He looked relaxed. Like this was his hotel. Like he paid for the walls. Lila followed him. My wife. Her hair was slightly looser than it had been at the gala. Not messy. She'd never allow messy. But softer, like she'd had her hands in it. Her lipstick was still perfect, but her cheeks had a faint flush that wasn't from champagne. She smiled at Dylan in a way I hadn't seen in months. Not the public smile, not the charity smile. The private one. Dylan said something, and Lila laughed quietly and touched his forearm. The same familiar touch. Then Dylan's hand slid to the small of her back. Not groping, not lewd, just owned. They walked toward the side corridor that led to the service exit, moving like a couple who didn't have to pretend when they thought no one was watching. I felt my vision narrow. It's strange. People think betrayal is this explosive thing, like a bomb, like a scream. But what hit me in that moment was colder. It was the realization that she'd been happy. Not just having fun, not being reckless, happy. While I'd been at home being practical, being steady, being low maintenance. Nadia moved first. She didn't rush them. She didn't yell. She simply stepped into the corridor at an angle where she'd be seen, her heels clicking lightly on the tile. Dylan looked up. For a fraction of a second, his face emptied, like someone had unplugged him. Then the mask snapped back into place. Calm, controlled, professional. "Nadia," he said, voice smooth. "What are you doing here?" Lila froze. Not the dramatic kind of freeze. The controlled freeze. The kind where you can see her mind calculating a story fast enough to beat the truth. My wife's eyes flicked over Nadia's shoulder and landed on me. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just looked at her. Steady. Practical. Lila's mouth opened slightly, like she was about to say my name, and then she didn't. Like even now, in the exact moment she'd been caught, she couldn't bring herself to acknowledge me out loud. Nadia's voice was soft. "I could ask you the same thing." Dylan's gaze flicked between us, fast. He was assessing. Counting exits. Lila recovered first. She always recovered first. "Oh my God," she said, putting a hand to her chest like she'd been wronged. What is this?" Her voice had that perfect outrage in it, like she couldn't believe we'd interrupt her evening with our insecurity. I felt something inside me click. She was going to try to flip it. She was going to make us the problem. I took one step forward, just enough to be in the same space, not aggressive, not threatening, just present. "Don't," I said quietly. Lila blinked. "Evan?" My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look away from her as I pulled it out. A text from Lila, sent 10 seconds ago. "Are you home?" I stared at the screen, then back at her face. She just asked me if I was home. While she was standing 3 feet in front of me at the Glasshouse Hotel, with Nadia's husband. My wife's eyes widened a fraction, realizing what she'd done. Dylan's expression tightened. Not fear, annoyance, like a plan had been inconvenienced. Nadia's voice came out like a blade wrapped in velvet. "Answer her," she murmured to me. "Let's see how far she takes the lie." And I realized, in that bright, quiet corridor, that the next thing I typed could decide whether this night ended in control or chaos. I looked down at the screen again. "Are you home?" The question glowed between my fingers like a dare. For a split second, the old version of me twitched, the version that smoothed things over, that chose the path of least resistance, that told himself keeping the peace was the same thing as being mature. That guy was tired. I typed back with my thumb, slow and deliberate. "Almost." Lila's phone vibrated in her hand. I watched her read the message, watched the muscles in her jaw tighten just enough to betray her. She recovered fast. She always did. Lifting her chin, eyes narrowing slightly, as if we were the inconvenience. "This is inappropriate," she said, her voice calm but sharp, the way she spoke to vendors who messed up her seating chart. "All of this. You're embarrassing yourselves." Dylan cleared his throat. "Let's all take a breath," he said, palms open, the universal gesture of a man who believed reason would protect him. "There's clearly been a misunderstanding." Nadia laughed once. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hysterical. It was surgical. "A misunderstanding?" she repeated. "That's interesting, Dylan, because last time I checked, misunderstandings don't book private lounges and lie to 2 spouses at the same time." Lila turned on her sister instantly. "Nadia, don't do this here." "Here?" Nadia echoed. "You mean the hotel where you pretend to save the world while screwing my husband?" I felt people nearby shift. Someone at the bar glanced over. The bartender paused mid-wipe, suddenly very invested in a glass that didn't need cleaning. Lila's eyes flicked around, calculating exposure, damage radius, escape routes. Then she did what I'd expected her to do eventually. She turned to me. "Evan," she said softly, stepping closer like she was approaching a skittish animal. "This isn't what it looks like." I almost laughed. Instead, I tilted my head. "Funny," I said. "I was just thinking it looks exactly like what it is." Her hand lifted, hovering like she might touch my arm, a gesture she hadn't used on me in months. I stepped back before she could. Her fingers froze in midair. That hurt her more than yelling ever could have. "Lower your voice," she whispered. "You're making a scene." "No," I said quietly. "I'm standing in one." Dylan shifted his weight, eyes darting toward the service exit. He was already planning his retreat, already measuring how to salvage this. Men like him didn't panic. They restructured. "Look," he said smoothly, "this doesn't need to turn into anything bigger than it already is. We're all adults here." Nadia turned toward him, smiling in a way that made my skin prickle. Adults don't hide behind staff-only doors. I felt something inside me settle. Not rage, not heartbreak. Focus. I glanced toward the lobby. 2 hotel employees stood near the desk, whispering. One of them recognized Lila. I saw it in his posture, the way he straightened, the way his eyes lingered just a beat too long. This was no longer a private moment. This was becoming a story. "Let's go," Lila said abruptly, grabbing Dylan's sleeve. "Now." She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't say my name. Again. Dylan hesitated. Just a fraction. And in that fraction, I saw something real crack through his composure. Annoyance, not fear, not guilt. Annoyance that this had become inconvenient. Nadia stepped aside, blocking the corridor with her body. She wasn't aggressive. She didn't touch him. She simply existed in his path. "Where exactly are you going?" she asked. "Home? Or back to your wife to tell her you were working late again?" Dylan's jaw tightened. "Move, Nadia." "No," she said pleasantly. "I think I'll stay right here." Lila spun on her sister. "You are out of line." Nadia's smile faded. "You don't get to decide where the line is anymore." I watched my wife in that moment, really watched her, and I saw the truth beneath the polish. She wasn't ashamed. She was furious. Furious that the version of reality she'd curated so carefully was slipping out of her hands. She turned back to me, eyes sharp. If you have something to say it. I thought about all the things I could say, about the months of distance, about the lies, about the way she'd slowly erased me from my own marriage. I chose none of them. Instead, I pulled the reservation card from my pocket and held it up between us. Private lounge, I said calmly. 11:30 p.m. 2 names. Her eyes flicked to it despite herself. Just for a second. That was enough? This is insane, she snapped. You went through my things? No, I said. You left them where someone who mattered might see them. The words landed heavier than I expected. Dylan took a step forward. Not toward me, toward Lila. Protective, possessive. Okay, he said, voice low. This is getting uncomfortable. That's the point, Nadia replied. I felt the moment tipping. Too much attention. Too many eyes. This was where things could go sideways if someone raised their voice or made a grab for control. I wasn't going to give them that. I stepped back again, deliberately increasing the space between us. You're right, I said, nodding at Dylan. This is uncomfortable. I looked at Lila. But don't worry, I continued. I'm not here to fight. I'm not here to shout. I just wanted to see you. Her brows knit. See me? Yes, I said. Because it's one thing to suspect. It's another thing to look your wife in the eye while she lies to your face, in real time. Her lips parted. No sound came out. For the first time that night, she didn't have a script. Dylan exhaled sharply, then forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We'll talk about this later, he said, already pivoting toward the exit. All of us. When emotions aren't so high? Nadia laughed again, softer this time. They aren't high, Dylan. They're focused. He tried to step around her. She didn't move. That's when he lost his patience. He leaned in, voice tight. Get out of my way. I stepped forward instantly, not to hit him, not to shove him, just to be there, close enough that he had to acknowledge me as an obstacle. You're not going anywhere with her, I said, nodding toward Lila. Not tonight. Dylan's eyes snapped to mine. For the first time, the amusement was gone. And who's going to stop me? He asked. I held his gaze, calm, steady. Consequences, I said. Lila let out a sharp breath. You don't get to threaten him. I'm not, I replied. I'm warning you. A security guard appeared at the end of the corridor, alerted by the raised voices and the cluster of bodies. Dylan noticed immediately. He straightened, smoothing his jacket, reclaiming his professional mask. Lila did the same. I realized something then. Something cold and useful. They weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of being seen. The guard approached. Everything all right here? Yes, Lila said instantly, flashing her foundation smile. Just a family disagreement. I met the guard's eyes. No argument from me. The guard looked between us, uncertain, then nodded. All right, let's keep it moving. Dylan seized the opening, slipping past Nadia toward the service exit. Lila followed him without looking back. Nadia stood frozen for a moment, watching them go. I watched my wife walk away from me again, this time in full view of witnesses, and felt something inside me finally harden. Not break. Harden. My phone buzzed once more. A new message from Lila. We'll talk when you calm down. I stared at the words. Then I locked my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. Nadia turned to me, eyes bright with something sharp and dangerous. They think this is over, she said. I shook my head slowly. No, I replied. They think this was a scare. I glanced toward the exit where Dylan and Lila had disappeared. They don't know yet, I continued, feeling the shift settle deep in my chest. That this was the introduction. And for the first time that night, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. We didn't follow them. That surprised Nadia. I saw it in the way she turned, already ready to move, already braced for pursuit, like that was the only honest reaction left. Aren't we? She started. No, I said, already walking toward the lobby. Not tonight. She caught up to me near the revolving doors. They're getting away. I smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. They're walking straight into tomorrow. Outside, the city hummed the way it always did when something inside you had just gone quiet. Traffic lights blinked. A couple laughed across the street. Somewhere a siren wailed and faded, like it had better things to do. We stood under the hotel awning for a moment, both of us staring at nothing. Nadia folded her arms. You're calmer than I expected. I'm done being surprised, I said. That frees up a lot of energy. She studied my face like she was reassessing the risk profile. You didn't even raise your voice. Why would I asked. They were counting on that. Her lips curved slightly. You're not what I thought you'd be. Neither are you, I said. That earned a real smile. Brief, sharp, gone just as fast. We walked toward our cars, parked on opposite sides of the street like we'd planned it that way. Halfway there, Nadia stopped. One thing, she said. Before we go home and pretend to sleep. I turned. They're not just cheating, she said quietly. They're sloppy. I waited. Dylan doesn't lie creatively, she continued. He lies efficiently. Same locations, same excuses, same rhythm. And your wife? She's worse. She believes her own version of events. That makes her dangerous. I nodded. I'd seen that look in Lila's eyes tonight. The certainty that reality would eventually bend back into shape if she pressed hard enough. They think tonight scared us, Nadia went on. They think we'll either explode or retreat. They're half right, I said. I'm retreating. She frowned. That doesn't sound like you. It's not, I replied. It's strategy. I opened my car door, then paused. If you want out, I added, now's the moment. What comes next won't be polite. Nadia met my gaze without hesitation. I didn't come here for polite. We drove off separately. At home, the apartment felt different. Not emptier, clearer. I hung my jacket up carefully. Habit. Sat on the edge of the bed. Habit. For a moment, I just listened. To the refrigerator hum, to a neighbor's TV through the wall, to my own breathing. Then I stood and started doing something Lila had always mocked me for. I made lists. Not angry lists, not dramatic ones, practical ones. I opened my laptop and pulled up the calendar. Lila's shared schedule was still synced. She hadn't thought to change it yet. I scanned the past month, cross-referencing nights she'd been busy with nights she'd come home light and loose, humming to herself like she'd won something. Patterns emerged fast when you stopped lying to yourself. Tuesdays, Thursdays, one Saturday a month, Glasshouse events, security consults, board dinners. I didn't screenshot anything, didn't forward anything, didn't do anything that could be twisted into snooping or spying. I just looked. Then I opened my email and searched one name, Voss. There it was, 3 months back. An innocuous chain from the Glasshouse facilities team about minor access adjustments requested by an external consultant. Dylan Voss. Security firms always needed access. Cameras, side corridors, private lounges. That was normal. What wasn't normal was how often his name appeared next to after-hours requests. I closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't about catching them in bed. It was about watching them move through the world like rules were decorative. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Nadia. He just got home, told me he was delayed by an incident at the hotel. I snorted quietly. Of course he did, I typed back. Another message followed almost immediately. He didn't notice I packed a bag. I paused, fingers hovering over the screen. Then, do you want help? I typed, or do you want space? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Help, but not yet. I need him comfortable, I smiled. Comfortable people made mistakes. I set my phone down and went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth, washed my face, looked at myself in the mirror longer than usual. I didn't look broken. I looked awake. Lila came home just after midnight. I heard her keys before I heard her heels. She moved carefully, like she expected me to be asleep or fragile. She stepped into the bedroom and froze when she saw me sitting on the bed, fully dressed. Oh, she said. You're up. I nodded. You said you'd be late. She exhaled, setting her purse down. The gala ran long, then there was a situation. A situation, I repeated. She met my eyes, then looked away, already rewriting. You shouldn't have come tonight. That almost made me laugh. You're right, I said calmly. I shouldn't have. Her head snapped up. Excuse me? I should have come earlier, I continued. Months earlier, before you got so comfortable lying to my face. Her posture stiffened instantly. Defensive, familiar. I don't know what you think you saw. I saw enough, I interrupted. She flinched, just a little. Evan, she said, lowering her voice, you're tired. You've been under a lot of stress lately. We can talk about this tomorrow. There it was. The first brick in the wall. I stood. I'm not yelling, I said. I'm not accusing. I'm not asking questions. She watched me carefully now, recalculating. Then what are you doing? I stepped past her and picked up her purse from the chair. I pulled out the black folder and set it on the bed between us. I'm adjusting, I said. Her face went pale. Not white. Pale. Like all the color had decided this wasn't the place to stay. That's private, she said sharply. So was our marriage, I replied. Silence stretched. She straightened, mask sliding back into place. You're being dramatic, I smiled. No, I said softly. I'm being precise. I walked toward the door, grabbed a pillow and a blanket from the hall closet. I'll sleep on the couch tonight, I added. Don't worry, I won't make a scene. Her eyes followed me, sharp with something new now. Not anger, calculation. As I lay down in the dark living room, staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed again. Nadia. He's asleep. He thinks he got away with it. I typed back without hesitation. Good. I set the phone aside, closed my eyes, and felt the last piece of myself that still wanted things to go back to normal finally let go. Tomorrow wasn't about catching them. Tomorrow was about letting them hang themselves, one comfortable step at a time. Morning came quietly. That's how lies like to end their nights. Without witnesses. Lila left early. Too early. Dressed carefully, makeup precise, movements efficient. She didn't look at me when she passed the couch. She didn't say my name. She didn't ask if I'd slept. She kissed the air near my cheek. That told me everything. I waited 10 minutes after the door closed, then stood and went to the kitchen. The black folder was gone. Of course it was. Lila didn't leave evidence lying around once she realized it could bite. My phone buzzed. Nadia. He's relaxed, talking about a busy week. Asked me to iron his jacket. I smiled. Comfortable men always asked for small services. It made them feel normal. Good, I typed. I need him predictable. I didn't go to work right away. I drove instead, not to the hotel, not to anywhere dramatic. I drove to the industrial strip by the river, where our company kept its service yard. Anonymous buildings, locked gates, boring places where things actually happened. Mara Sloan was already there, coffee in hand, reviewing a clipboard like the world might collapse if a line item went unchecked. You're early, she said without looking up. So are problems, I replied. That got her attention. We walked the perimeter while I talked, carefully, neutrally, like a man flagging a loose railing instead of dismantling a life. Last night there was unauthorized movement through the service corridor at the Glasshouse, I said. Not criminal, just sloppy. I want logs tightened, vendor access reviewed, especially external security consultants. Mara stopped walking, looked at me fully now. Something I should worry about? Only if it keeps happening, I said. Which it will. She studied my face for a long moment. Mara didn't ask questions she didn't want answers to. Put it in writing, she said finally. I'll back the review. That was all I needed. By noon, Dylan Voss's name was officially flagged for routine reassessment. Not suspended, not accused, just noticed. By afternoon, Lila texted me for the first time that day. We need to talk tonight. No apology, no explanation, a command disguised as concern. Sure, I replied. I'll be home. I spent the rest of the day doing something new. Nothing. I didn't call. I didn't follow. I didn't confront. I let the silence stretch. Silence makes liars nervous. They need friction to push against. When you remove it, they start inventing threats. That evening, Nadia called. Not texted. Called. He's rattled, she said softly. Didn't say why, just edgy, asked if I'd talk to you. And? I asked. I said no. Good. She hesitated. Evan, what exactly are you doing? I leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. I'm shrinking their world. There was a pause on the line, then a quiet breath. Okay, she said. Tell me what you need. Tomorrow night, I said. There's a donor preview at the Glasshouse. Small, off the record. I need Dylan there, and I need him thinking he's in control. Nadia didn't ask how. I'll make sure he goes, she said. Anything else? Yes, I replied. When he leaves, I want him driving. She went still. Evan? Nothing illegal, I said calmly. Nothing violent. I just want him alone with his choices. Another pause. Okay, she said. I trust you? That surprised me more than it should have. Lila came home late again. This time she didn't pretend. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp. You're acting strange. I smiled. I learned from the best. She stepped closer. I won't be ambushed in my own house. You won't be ambushed at all, I said. You'll be invited. Her eyes narrowed. Invited to what? I picked up my phone, unlocked it, and showed her the calendar reminder I'd added. Glasshouse, tomorrow night. Her breath caught, just slightly. You're coming? She asked. Yes, I said. I think it's time I stopped being low maintenance. She stared at me, searching for anger, for instability, for something she could use. She found none. That night, I slept in the bed. Not beside her, on my side, still, quiet. And for the first time since this started, she didn't touch me. The next evening, the glass house glowed again. Softer this time, more intimate. Fewer people, sharper eyes. I arrived early. Dylan arrived confident. Too confident. I watched from across the room as he laughed with donors, shook hands, adjusted his cufflinks like nothing in the world had shifted beneath his feet. Then he saw me. The smile didn't disappear, but it thinned. I raised my glass in a small, polite salute. He hesitated, just long enough. Later, when he left, he took the underground ramp instead of valet. Good. I followed at a distance. The garage was half empty, concrete echoing every footstep. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Dylan walked fast now, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and irritated. I didn't rush him. I waited until he reached his car, until he unlocked it, until he turned and saw me standing behind the yellow line, hands in my pockets, calm as a man waiting for an elevator. What do you want? He snapped. Just to talk, I said. He laughed sharply. You're making a mistake. No, I replied. You already did. He stepped toward me, chest puffed, voice dropping. You think you can scare me? I didn't answer. I reached into my pocket and held up a folded paper. Not evidence, not proof, a tow notice. Private property, I said mildly. You parked in a restricted zone. His eyes flicked to his car, to the sign behind it. Realization hit. The tow truck rolled in behind him, lights flashing once. Just once. Dylan spun back to me. You can't... I didn't, I said. I just let things happen. The operator stepped out, clipboard in hand. Dylan looked around the garage. Empty, echoing, suddenly very public. For the first time, fear crept into his face. Not of pain, of loss of control. As the chains clinked and his car lifted inch by inch, I leaned in close enough that only he could hear me. This is the part where you start losing things, I said quietly. Not fast, not loudly, just one by one. I stepped back. The car rose, and Dylan Voss stood there, stranded, watching his world begin to move without him. Dylan didn't call that night. That told me more than any threat ever could. Men like him didn't lash out when they felt powerful. They went quiet. They called lawyers. They tested which doors still opened when they pushed. By morning, he was already working angles. Lila woke up before me and stood at the mirror longer than usual, fixing a version of herself that could survive scrutiny. When she noticed I was awake, she didn't flinch. You embarrassed him, she said, like she was reading a weather report. He embarrassed himself, I replied. She turned slowly. You think this ends well for you? I sat up. I think it ends. Her lips pressed together. You don't understand how this world works. I do now, I said. That's the problem. She picked up her phone and walked out of the room without another word. No apology, no denial, just escalation. My phone buzzed 10 minutes later. Nadia. He's angry, not scared. Angry. He says you crossed a line. I smiled. Good. Angry men rush. There was a pause, then. He's calling in favors, asking questions about you. Let him, I typed back. I don't have secrets. He has habits. By noon, the pressure started. A call from HR. Polite, concerned. Just checking in. A message from a mutual acquaintance asking if everything was okay at home. A text from Lila. We need to present a united front. That one made me laugh. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the glass house. Not to confront anyone, not to sneak around. I walked straight through the front doors and into a room where people wore badges and spoke in careful sentences. Mara was there, 2 board members, 1 legal rep. Routine review. That's what it was called when you wanted to end something quietly. They talked about access protocols, about liability, about reputational risk. I didn't accuse. I didn't speculate. I just answered questions honestly. Yes, he had after-hours access. Yes, it was frequent. No, it wasn't documented properly. Yes, it created exposure. Words like exposure and risk did the work violence never could. By the time I left, nothing had been decided, but nothing was safe anymore. That afternoon, Nadia called again. Her voice was different now, steadier. "He's trying to charm me," she said. Brought flowers. Apologized without apologizing. "Did you accept them?" I asked. "I put them in water," she replied, "where I can watch them wither." I almost said I was sorry she was in this. I didn't. She wasn't a passenger anymore. "There's something else," she said. "He thinks Lila will fix this." Of course he did. Lila had always been good at smoothing things over. Reframing, making people feel unreasonable for noticing the truth. That evening, she finally confronted me properly. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She sat across from me at the table like we were negotiating a contract. "You're damaging things you don't understand," she said. "Dylan is valuable." "To who?" I asked. She hesitated, just long enough. "To people who matter," she said. I nodded. "Then you picked the wrong husband." Her eyes hardened. "If you keep this up, I'll tell them you're unstable." There it was, the word she'd been circling since the beginning. Unstable. I leaned back. "Do it." She blinked. "What?" "Tell them," I said calmly. "Say I'm jealous. Say I'm spiraling. Say whatever helps you sleep." She searched my face for panic. Found none. "You won't win this," she said quietly. "I already did," I replied. "You just don't know where the finish line is yet." She stood abruptly. "You're making a mistake." I watched her walk out, heels sharp against the floor. That night Nadia came over again. No knocking this time. I'd left the door unlocked. She didn't sit. She paced. "He's desperate," she said. "He thinks if he can discredit you, everything resets." "It won't," I said. "Why are you so sure?" I looked at her. "Because tomorrow he's going to try something." She stopped pacing. "What kind of something?" "The kind that puts him where witnesses are," I said. "The kind that feels like a power move." Nadia swallowed. "And Lila?" "She'll stand beside him," I said, "until she realizes he's standing on her." There was a knock at the door. We both froze. I checked the time. Too early. Too controlled. I opened it. Dylan stood there. No suit. No smile. Just irritation wrapped in confidence. "We need to talk," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. That was his second mistake. He didn't notice the phone in my hand. He didn't notice Nadia standing just out of sight. He didn't notice how quiet the room felt. "You think you're clever," he said, already pacing. "But you're playing a game you can't finish." I closed the door behind him. "Oh," I said softly. "I'm not playing anymore." Nadia stepped forward. Dylan turned, and in that moment, the exact moment he realized he was no longer controlling the room, I saw it. Not fear, understanding. Tomorrow would be public, tomorrow would be irreversible. And Dylan Voss, for the first time in his life, had walked into a room he couldn't charm his way out of. Dylan didn't sit. He stood in the middle of my living room like it was a conference room he'd paid for, hands loose at his sides, jaw set. He kept glancing at the door behind him, not because he wanted to leave, because he wanted control. Nadia stepped fully into the light. For the first time, he didn't hide it. "Jesus," he muttered. "You planned this?" "No," Nadia said calmly. "You did." He turned to me. "You two think you can corner me?" I shrugged. "You walked in." His lips curled. "You don't have anything. No proof, no leverage. Just feelings." I smiled. "You still don't get it." I nodded toward Nadia. She lifted her phone and set it on the table. Screen up, no recording, no theatrics, just a calendar. Dylan stared. "What is this?" he asked. "My life," Nadia said. "Before and after you. Dates, times, locations, security consult, late meeting, client dinner, glasshouse, glasshouse, glasshouse. And one name repeated again and again beside his. Lila." "You're insane," Dylan snapped. "This is circumstantial." "Everything is," I said, "until enough people see it." He turned on me, voice rising. "You think donors care? You think boards care? They care about outcomes, about money, about optics?" "Yes," I said quietly. "That's why tomorrow matters." He froze. "Tomorrow?" he repeated. I stepped closer, not threatening, just close enough that he had to look at me. "Tomorrow morning," I said, "there's a closed-door risk review at the Glasshouse. You're scheduled to attend. So is my wife." Nadia added, "And so am I." Dylan laughed, sharp and humorless. "You can't stop me." I don't need to, I said. You already confirmed everything. His eyes flicked to my phone. Too late. I hadn't recorded him yelling. I hadn't recorded him confessing. I'd recorded something better. His arrival. Him letting himself into my home. Him saying, "We need to talk." A calm man showing up late at night to confront a husband and his wife's sister. Risk, exposure, uncontrolled behavior. The kind boards didn't like. Dylan backed up a step. You're trying to ruin me. I tilted my head. No, I'm letting you be yourself in the wrong room. He turned to Nadia. Tell him to stop. She shook her head. You already stopped mattering. Silence pressed down on the room. Dylan straightened his jacket, forcing the old mask back on. You think Lila will let this happen? I smiled. She already did. His phone buzzed. He glanced down, then again. His face drained slowly this time. What? I asked. He swallowed. She's not answering. I leaned in, voice low. She's busy deciding which version of you she wants to stand next to. Dylan stared at me, really stared, like he was seeing a stranger where a nuisance used to be. You're enjoying this, he said. No, I replied. I'm finishing it. I opened the door. Get out. He hesitated. Then he walked past me, shoulders stiff, the smell of his cologne lingering like something spoiled. The door closed behind him. Nadia exhaled. Not relief, not grief, release. He's done, she said. Not yet, I replied. But he can see it. Morning came fast. Too fast for liars. The Glasshouse conference room was all glass and steel and polite tension. No audience. Just people who understood consequences without needing them explained. Dylan arrived late. Lila arrived immaculate. They didn't sit together. I stood near the wall, not at the table, not asking to be heard. I didn't need to speak. Nadia did. Calm, precise, controlled. She didn't say the word affair. She said pattern. She said undisclosed relationships. She said reputational exposure. People leaned forward. Dylan interrupted once. That was enough. Lila reached for him instinctively, then stopped. That was everything. A board member cleared his throat. A legal rep asked for a pause. A suspension was mentioned. A review. Language that didn't sound dramatic, but ended careers. Dylan stood abruptly. This is outrageous. No one stopped him. He walked out alone. Lila didn't follow. She turned to me instead. Not pleading, not apologetic, terrified. Evan, she whispered, please. I met her eyes one last time and stepped back. The room filled with quiet conversation. Phones came out. Notes were made. I walked out into the lobby, bright, public, unforgiving. Behind me, glass doors closed. In front of me, the city moved on. And for the first time in a long time, it moved without them.